Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Dan Murphy. I'm a correspondent at CNBC International. Really good to be back at InnovFest this year. Thank you so much for having us. As you just heard, this is a conversation about the consumer revolution. The consumer revolution, probably something that you've all heard about, but today we wanted to get a little bit more specific about exactly what this means, and hopefully you can learn something from it as well. So the brief for this conversation is, technology has put the power of commerce squarely in the hands of the consumer, who now have more choice, more market knowledge, and more buying power than at any time in history. Tapping into this new kind of consumer will require a brand new approach, changing the playbook on a century of consumer knowledge. We have a fantastic panel for you this afternoon as well. So I'll say hello and you can all wave to introduce yourself. So Simon, first to you. Simon Tate is the Area Vice President for Salesforce. Simon, welcome. Parin Mehta is the Director of Hosts and Homes in the Asia Pacific for AirBnB. Yara Paoli leads Skyscanner's global growth and marketing strategy. Ketan Samani is Managing Director and Chief Digital Officer at UBS Wealth Management in APAC. And we also have Hayley joining us on the panel as well. She's Head of Consumer Insights at Stylus Media. It's an innovation, research, trends, and membership service. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. And I've broken it down into 4 different categories for us this afternoon to get through a couple of key points. And the first category I'm calling KYC, Know Your Customer, so to speak. So let's define this new consumer, first of all. Who is this person? Enabled by technology, hyper-connected, as we all know, mostly mobile, and they make decisions based on experience. So Simon, I wanted to go to you first on this one because as a good journalist, I've been spending my nights stalking your LinkedIn page, and recently I read a post that you did, which I thought was just fantastic and captures this quite well. So in this post you wrote, buyers are now incredibly aware. They're much better researchers than they used to be. They can review a product and immediately find reviews and recommendations from friends and experts. Get this. We know that 85% of their buying decision is typically made before they even choose to engage with a salesperson. So from a Salesforce perspective, how does that influence you? And how does Salesforce meet, engage, and retain this new type of consumer?
Sure. Well, thanks, Dan, and thanks for hitting me with the hard one first. That wasn't part of the preparation. Firstly, welcome to the other panelists, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be in such good company. So you're absolutely right. We know that these days, 85%, in some cases even more, of any consumer's buying decision is made before they even choose to engage with the vendor of the product or service that they're interested in buying from. Now, if that doesn't represent enough of a challenge for us, what makes that worse is that our research suggests that 2/3 of all consumers who have been loyal to a particular brand or a particular service will very quickly drop that brand if they have a single bad sales or service or marketing experience. So that makes it incredibly difficult for companies these days because on one hand, most of the buying decision is already made, and on the other hand, once the buying decision has been made, even if you have enjoyed loyalty from that particular customer over many, many years, we are very fickle now as consumers, and we have no hesitation whatsoever in dumping a product if we have a bad experience. So that speaks to the essence of the article that you read and what we have always anchored ourselves to as an organization is to try to help companies connect with their customers in a much better way. And I'm sure throughout the discussion we'll see what those connection points are. Some of them are generational. Some of them have been made easier or more difficult, depending on your perspective, based on the hyper-connected world that we now live in with social and mobile. So it's really interesting to see how our views as consumers have changed, and they've changed markedly, by the way. So I'm 43, and I know that the experience that my 70-year-old parents have, or the intolerance that they have to a bad sales or service or marketing experience, is exactly the same as the intolerance that my younger Gen Y siblings have, which I think is fascinating. And again, it just speaks to why I think it's so difficult for companies now to really grasp this change in consumer sentiment.
All right, so let's run with that. Anyone else have a view on why the new consumer is less loyal than previous generations? And what do we think of this generational divide between old and new consumer? Hayley?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest kind of influences we're seeing on consumers around the world is a sense of volatility, fragmentation, exactly as you've described, that's manifesting in a greater sense of disloyalty. But if I were to break that down on the differences between different generations, I would note a marked kind of unifier that goes between the Gen Z, your sort of teen demographic, and your older Gen X counterpart. And that really is a strong sense of realism and the sense of an end of having any kind of brand decide your future, really, and what products you're going to buy. With the sort of millennial demographic that comes immediately after Gen Z, they have a much more idealistic outlook that is forcing brands to kind of have a different approach to them. And I think this sense of realism that I mentioned earlier as a bridge value between two of the biggest and most valuable demographics we see is going to become only more important as you look at Gen Alpha, those who are just being born now under the age of 7, replacing the Gen Z cohort.
Parin, have you got a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, some of the data that we look at is that people make a decision in the moment about what they want to do. So one way to try and encourage some of this stickiness is to offer an experience, and that's something that we've been working on quite a lot. So some stats, for example, we know that for 43% of millennials, if money was no object, we know that they'd spend the money on travel more than anything. And so for us, we kind of think of the world in terms of hosts and guests. For the host, it's around building this self-enforcing community that help each other be really successful in providing hospitality. And for the guests, it's really about figuring out what they want. So if we take the APAC example for, just for discussion, we know there's a growing middle class. We know they're super connected. They're very comfortable with messaging apps, very comfortable with payments. And so the discussion becomes, how do you build things that really cater to that need?
With Airbnb in particular, how do you guarantee that each and every one of your new consumers has a good experience when the experience that they have from start to finish with the service is almost entirely out of your control?
Yeah. So we have a very strong mission that many of you might know. It's to help anyone belong anywhere, and that permeates throughout the company and also throughout our host and guest community. So we do a lot of things to help hosts increase the quality of the listing that they might have, whether it's help them with photography, content creation, etc. And then with the guests, it's this self-enforcing community who try and do interesting things. We also find that a lot of the guests become hosts and a lot of hosts become guests. One of the new businesses that we've launched is around experiences. So for a lot of people, we know that they want to host in their city, but they might not have the space, or there might be other factors that prevent them from doing this. And so they can host a trip in their own city, which again is another form of stickiness. So I did one recently in India with a fashion designer. I'm not the most fashion conscious guy in the world, but this was a really interesting experience.
How would you say that the overall experience side of the business is working? Is it contributing to revenue yet?
It's very much a growth business, and we're learning a lot of things. We're now live in 26 cities. We've got a plan to get to 50, and we started in November, so we're making really good progress.
Yara, I wanted to bring you in there, but can you hear properly? Are you okay?
I'm sorry, Dan. I was trying to ask if they can fix the audio because it's really tricky to understand from here. So I was asking the technician if they can, because I can't understand what you're saying.
No, I agree. I think what we need is a floor monitor facing back towards this way because I can't hear across the panel. It's very echoey at the back. if anyone can have a look into that in the next few minutes. But to move on, Ketan, if you can hear me, I wanted to get over to you, because I think you have a really a unique experience here as well across your roles in finance. If you have a look at your work history overall, HSBC, Barclays, Stanchart, DBS, and now UBS. So you know exactly how important trust is in your space, but you've also seen the industry take on challenge and opportunity, and the opportunity that digitization presents. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in your space right now when it comes to the new consumer, and who are they? How do you attract them to, you know, what I would describe as a more traditional model of wealth management over at UBS?
I don't think that the traditional model is a challenge. Digitization itself is an opportunity, but it's heavily misunderstood. So I would start by saying that digitization presents an opportunity to increase empathy by banks in the consumer's needs and address them appropriately. And in the philosophy of my team, what we use is technology evolution and disruption is not necessarily the issue. The issue is, are the silos within the organization, like banks, working collaboratively to drive one single point, is best-in-class client experience. And we're seeing that 5 years ago when the rise of fintechs and robo-advisors were challenging private banks. Today, the banks are still not irrelevant. They're extremely relevant and continue to remain competitive.
Let's bring you in here, Yara, if you can. Let's get a view from 30,000 feet, if you will, over at Skyscanner. What's your view on the new consumer from the Skyscanner perspective, and what exactly does he or she want? Because I know you've identified 4 specific areas that the new consumer needs and wants relating specifically to Skyscanner.
Absolutely. So from our perspective, of course, we focus on the travelers. So travelers are our main consumers. What we have identified is that the new consumer wants seamlessness and simplification, especially in relation to the travel booking process. This is a problem that has never been solved by anyone in terms of solving the end-to-end booking process. So the new traveler wants convenience and wants usability. This has really to do with what we would call the personal operating system of a traveler, that nowadays, given the new technology, is made of mobile. And by mobile, I don't mean only smartphones, but smart devices in general, smart speakers, apps, and all the platforms that actually can integrate or become part of these apps. So this is really recognizing that from a product perspective, you need to adapt and extend your product to actually meet the consumer's need in this sense. Another important area that defines the new consumer is about choice. And by choice, I really mean making use of big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to provide more informed decisions to the consumers and the travelers overall. There is an increased need for transparency in the travel sector, and of course, travelers want to be able to trust the brand they interact with, and therefore this plays an important role in shaping who the users are. The other 2 aspects that are really important are personalization and personality. Personalization, again, is the need of getting the right information at the right time in the right context. Of course, from the industry and the product perspective, this again relies a lot on data analysis, machine learning, and being able to provide either predictive patterns or a product that is based on such patterns to improve the user experience and enable them to make easier decisions. The last aspect, which is the one that probably seems less related to technology, is personality. What we have found is that the users do not want to interact with the corporate travel brands anymore. They want to find values they can mirror themselves into. They want to interact with the humans behind the brand, and they want to be reassured that there is a human touch in the brand they interact with.
Do you think there's more that unites your 2 businesses than divides them on this issue?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I'd love to hear from Yara. I know that Skyscanner, as a brand, they've really moved from looking at traditional marketing to more of a growth hacking approach. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. As Skyscanner, I think we are following, obviously, the innovation trends quite a lot, and we recognize the importance of having an environment and the talented people in our organization that are data-driven, that develop a growth mindset, and that are agile in nature. It is actually very important for us also to keep what we would call a startup mode, even if we are now a very big company of more than 850 people with 14 offices across the world. So what we have done in that sense is to make sure that we provide to our employees a data literacy program that allow people to upskill in data science and in data analysis. And we have used an approach that is typical of the lean startups, for which everything is based on build, measure, and learn. This allows an experimentation environment that is what leads to innovation. The belief underlying here is that innovation is not really the task of one single team or one single person, but should be shared across the organization. So everybody can disrupt the industry, everybody can innovate. And what I was mentioning before around the growth mindset, what we mean by this is that we want to instigate a behavior that looks at exponential growth for the business, not necessarily just incremental growth. And this allows us to achieve times 10 kind of achievements rather than small increments to our results.
Simon, do you want to weigh in here, or anyone else at the end of the panel? Do you think it is getting harder to find and attract this new type of consumer, the one that we're discussing right now?
Thanks, Dan. Yes, I think it is more difficult. I do think, however, that once you've found this new breed of consumer, technology allows us to keep that consumer if we do the right things. I made the comment before that consumers these days are incredibly fickle, that loyalty doesn't mean the same thing now as what it meant certainly 5 or 10 years ago. But I think the technology is now available to not only help companies attract more customers, but also to retain the existing customer base that they have. And everyone knows it costs more generally to acquire a new customer than it does to keep an existing customer. Have we got time for a personal story, Dan? Do you mind if I throw a personal story in just to bring some context to this? So I've been incredibly loyal to a particular brand of sunglasses for most of my life. And on rough maths, I would have purchased over the last 20 years, I don't know, let's call it 30 pairs of sunglasses. And I've purchased sports apparel and some golf shoes and a bag. And I purchase from this particular brand, whether I'm traveling in the US or whether I'm here in Singapore. So I've been a customer of this particular brand for more than 20 years. The challenge is that something went wrong with the product that I had, and it took me 4 months, many phone calls to the US because they didn't even have a local number. I had to fill in this crazy, complicated web form to log a ticket for my issue. I ended up sending the product back at my expense, and 4 months later, I got one of the 2 pairs of sunglasses that I sent back, and they weren't even representative of the one that I sent them. They were a completely different look to what I sent them. So, you know, here I am, a customer, loyal customer for 20 years, love the product, and I've now had one bad service experience, and I will never, ever, ever buy from them ever again. And my challenge with that, and this is not me, by the way, we see this in every company that we talk to. The challenge is that this company didn't even know that I was a customer. Why? Why did they not know that I've been spending money with them for 20 years? So the only time they ever get to know that I'm a customer is when I have a problem with their product. And even then, they treat me so badly that I never want to buy from them again. So there's 2 parts to the answer. Yes, I think technology makes it easier to find a new breed of customer if you do it right. But the technology that is available today also allows us to keep customers that we already have happy and lifelong advocates. But you only get one shot at it. You can't mess it up. If you mess up a bad experience for a customer that has been loyal to you for 20 years, that's it, it's game over. You just go and move somewhere else, because I found another pair of sunglasses that was just as good, was actually cheaper, and again, I did most of my research based on the recommendations of my friends and family on social media. The worst part about what I've just said is that the company that I'm referring to doesn't know that they've lost me as a customer. I mean, that is crazy. You didn't know I was one, then you found out that I was one because something was wrong with your product, and now they don't even know that I'm not a customer anymore. That is just not sustainable, and it is the single biggest challenge that I think businesses now have in this new era of the social and mobile and hyper-connected consumer. But I also think it's the single biggest opportunity that companies have to get it right.
Just wanted to offer a dimension on what you said. For the banks, everybody needs money. It's a matter of how much relationship we want to keep. And we keep losing clients, we keep winning clients. That's just the way the industry is now consider that to be a norm. And the relationship with the consumer is almost as good as somebody deleting your app. So if they don't want to do business with you, that's it. What I find is that the most industries finding it difficult, and I think the new generation industries, the more tech-driven industries, have found pull aspect from the consumers much better. Constantly from a marketing and sales, there's a push because you've got a target. That doesn't do well with the consumer because you lose the empathy of what the clients really need. That needs to change. Relevancy in terms of personalization, as you mentioned earlier, is fundamentally important behind that, and then the fulfillment component, as you mentioned very clearly. And that overlays by intelligence for the decision makers, whether the consumers are with you or not. With a bank like ours, where we have a very high touch personal service for private banking, we use multiple approach to consumers and at multiple generation level. It is not about new clients or old clients. Second generations are also involved in the banking with the clients who've got $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion to bank with us. So you can't afford to have new or old scenario. You need to have a full family-wide service models, which are very complex, diverse, and multinational, multi-jurisdiction issues that you have to deal with. But within that, digital can play a very clear role of satisfying each generation for what they need, provided the bank is listening, which is where we are, and that's why we managed to be ahead, 4 to 5 years ahead of any private bank in the world with the products and services innovation. That the second generation always requires.
All right, I wanted to change pace a little bit, move on to the second topic that I wanted to talk about, which is something that also unites all of us, and that's a push into China and a push into other major markets. And if you have a look at the example in China, 1.3 billion people, 800 million of them are using WeChat every day. 800 million monthly active users on WeChat, which I think is just staggering. It's a staggering number. That's like almost 3 times the population of the US. So let's talk a bit about the China opportunity, and I wanted to ask from Airbnb's perspective in particular. One of the latest Western companies to make a move into China. A lot of local competition there now as well. Do you think that Airbnb can win in China where other companies have failed? And what strategies are you putting in place to attract the new consumer in China?
Yeah, so interesting question. Again, I'd probably think about it in terms of guests and hosts, and I'd probably put another lens on it around the domestic opportunity and the outbound opportunity. Now, the domestic opportunity, a lot of strong tech players. We've got teams there building supply on the ground. The outbound opportunity is really interesting. This year will be about 120 to 140 million Chinese will leave. We know they're going to a lot of places. We also know on Airbnb, typically 1 in every 3 trips that lands in APAC is to Japan. So there's these very clear corridors that we know exist, and we're doing a lot of work to understand what exactly Chinese users want, and specifically millennials, and then how to provide it to them. And then I think if you kind of take a step back from there, it's really interesting to think about what society needs at this point as well, right? So we're all connected, we all have mobile devices, but a lot of people are lonely, and a lot of people are lost, and they're looking for something that brings people together. And at the risk of being really unpopular at a tech conference, I think it's going to be interesting to see in the future that there's these ideas of platforms that really bring people together and make them more connected offline is a really interesting angle for Airbnb.
When I use Airbnb, more often than not, it's either on the web or on my mobile phone. How does the website, how does the app look in China?
Very similar to how you'd expect. We've made a few local customizations, but for the most part.
And what's in a name? I have to ask as well. You've also had a lot of feedback, a lot of constructive feedback, I would contend, about the name that was chosen to make a play into China. Are you going to change it?
I can't comment on whether we'd change it, but it's really around how do you capture the ideals and mission of the brand and convey that to a really big audience and maybe a new audience.
Yara, can I ask you as well, because Skyscanner is also making a pretty significant play into China as well. Last year purchased by Ctrip, which is one of the largest Chinese travel companies in the world. The deal was worth about $1.74 billion, I think. How is that working? What is your broader China engagement strategy, and what are you doing to attract the new consumer there?
So our approach in China is very localized. So it has always been since the beginning, even before being acquired by Ctrip. We have a separate domain and an ad hoc Chinese name, Tianchun. So it's not Skyscanner, the brand name there. And we pay a lot of attention to the Chinese consumer because we believe that they are the trend setters. So there is a lot of learning that we can get out of the Chinese consumer. Overall, the 4 points that I mentioned before around simplification, personalization, choice, and personality are still valid in China, but the landscape around this personal operating system that I was mentioning is much more advanced. So you were talking about WeChat. I think in China, the way that they're using and shaping open payment platforms like WeChat Wallet or Alipay is teaching the rest of the world where the consumer are going. The differentiation, for example, of use and trust put into app user behavior in terms of booking for travel is quite significantly different from the other Western countries where desktop, for example, is still prevalent. So we are obviously testing in advance a lot of our strategy in China to validate our thinking and see how we can apply it in other markets. The acquisition from Ctrip for us is a great thing because, of course, being one of the Chinese travel giants, we can get a lot of learnings from their expertise, their technology, and we can find and develop a lot of synergies there.
Hayley, what about from your perspective? What's the demand like for research and insights out of China and other Asian markets?
On China and Asian markets specifically. We're seeing an increasing interest, particularly from the UK and our clients in the US. And the reason for that is exactly as you just said, they're really setting the pace in technological development. Apps like Snow, soon showing themselves to have much better filters than competitors like Snapchat over in the West. And we're seeing that our clients, particularly at Stylus, are very interested in engaging this early adopter mindset and finding new strategies that tap into it as it's going to rapidly appear elsewhere. It's very much not seen as a localized innovation hub.
And do you think that'll be a new growth driver for you as well? Sorry, Hayley.
Oh, me.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be a big growth driver. I think that we call it sometimes an APAC mentality, and that's something that's very important to tap into. And I think that a lot of the growth will come from not just the technologies that we've described and even tapping into things like live streaming, live hangouts, not in the traditional sense, but almost gathering your friends around a sofa for the Gen Z market. That's something we're seeing take off in China that will happen elsewhere and be hugely relevant for brands. But I think that a lot of the growth will also come as brands start to realize even more just how valuable the market is over here.
Ketan, over to you on this as well. I think it was also interesting. We were speaking just on the side of the stage before about some of the opportunities that a lot of the traditional players are also seeing in these markets. DBS, for example, just acquired some ANZ assets. They've also been making a pretty big move into Indonesia thanks to the release of the tax amnesty there. What's UBS's role and view on all of this? What's your take on this, Greater China expansion strategy? And when it comes to the wealth management side in particular, what do you do to attract new customers who may be more inclined to manage wealth digitally as opposed to those traditional forms?
UBS has got fairly good foothold in China already, and we've been sustainably investing in China. Very recently, a couple of weeks ago, we launched Talent University for acquiring more wealth managers to work for us. And we have a JV and a domestic presence there. In China, I would have thought the top cream billionaire clients are all our banks with us. One of the most interesting dynamics when you see China versus non-China Asian countries is that majority of the tech giants and innovators are self-made. We look at our billionaire clients, they're all self-made. And we look at the competition outside it, the CEOs of the competitions are not self-made. They haven't built the company. So the passion with which we see competition and acquiring clients is very high in China compared to anywhere else.
Simon, over to you. I wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. Are there Chinese and perhaps Indian businesses or other businesses around the region that are seeking CRM, and how are you finding them?
Yeah, I don't think it's any different in one particular market, but when we look at Asia Pacific as a whole, obviously between Mumbai and Taipei, we have 2/3 of the world's population right here on our doorstep. So if we anchor back to the consumer revolution, this is where it's happening. With close to 3 billion people, it's not hard to see why we're seeing an amplification of this change in consumer sentiment, the way that people buy, the way that companies, whether they're American-based or European-based or Asia-Pacific-based, all of these companies need to sell to people in Asia-Pacific. So their customers are here, regardless of whether their businesses are here. And that's where we see, obviously, a huge opportunity. Second to that, remember that in some geographies in Asia-Pac, you not only have some of the highest populaces in the world, like Indonesia, for example, 300 million people, but you have some of the youngest populations in the world, and you certainly have some of the highest per capita penetration rates of both smartphone usage and social media usage. So I think the whole world is looking to Asia Pacific as really the test bed for how do we get this pivot to a B2C, a business to consumer narrative right, because this is where it has to happen. I would argue that in places like Europe and in places like the US, you still have a higher weighting to B2B, business-to-business type transactions. In some of these emerging markets in Asia Pacific, we've completely gone past that. These companies are starting with the view of connecting to their customers from day one. And so the whole customer revolution in Asia Pacific, I just think is fascinating. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's China or Indonesia or India, all of these companies are facing exactly the same challenge. But again, they're also facing exactly the same limitless opportunity if they get it right.
All right, we only have a few minutes left as well. Actually, we have about 2 minutes left. So let's quickly go through and touch on the final point, which I wanted to ask you all about, which is on execution. So customers have little reason to stay loyal to a lot of the brands, as we know. If you don't look after the new kind of consumer, someone else will. And Yara came to me during the week with a really good point on this. And your question was, how do brands and companies ensure that they have the right teams and the right talent to react to the pace of innovation to deliver on what the new consumer wants? want. So perhaps one by one, just tell me one thing that you're doing within your business to engage with the new consumer, to react to this pace of change from within your own organization.
Yeah, so a couple of things from me. I think one thing is putting people on the ground who can actually pick up the phone, meet, engage with hosts and guests, and really find what they want. And then I think with any really mission-driven company, it's really important to have a shared set of core values within the company that people subscribe to. So one of the ones at Airbnb that I really love is this idea of being a host. So whether you're in the workplace and you're hosting a meeting, how can you exemplify some of those values that we expect to see from our community?
In our case, Skyscanner is acknowledging the fact that the new consumer wants simplification, and we are investing on what is called a direct booking, which is a simplification of the booking process, for which we are moving from simple price comparison to product comparison, acknowledging that the consumer do not want just price or cheapness, but they want service and quality of service. So this service will allow the travelers to compare, for example, the meals offers or seats on a plane, as well as baggage fees and this kind of stuff that is quite innovative compared to the previous simple price comparison.
Hayley?
For me, the key word is connection. At Stylus, we're all about connected innovation, and that really means keying into the most important and relevant insights across markets, looking at how contexts are changing, and having the ability to put that into practice.
Ketan?
Three-tier tools. We engage clients to design our channels and digital capabilities. We don't do it. So it's very relevant to the segment we are serving because it's designed by the clients. Every screen, every bit. Second thing, ethnographic research to make sure we understand and uncover opportunities with the consumers, all the generations where possible. And third, comprehensive and continuous change management to make sure we can react to what the consumers want.
Two things, if I may, Dan. The first is have a consistent experience across sales, service, and marketing. Consumers now don't want to have a great buying experience and then be let down or have a divorced service experience where the agent has no context on their habitual buying patterns. They also don't want to receive a marketing campaign for a pink bag when all I buy is blue socks. So sales, service, and marketing together is really important, and I think the coming together of sales and marketing as two previously distinct functions in any business, those days are over. They are now absolutely one and the same thing. So that would be the first thing. Second thing, and it sounds simple, but not many people do it, be a customer of your own product or brand or service. Test the customer experience, critique it, and then innovate. It's amazing when you replay a customer experience to someone that you've been loyal to, they have no idea that that's your experience. And then you say, well, are you a customer of your own brand? Have you been through what I've just been through? And 90% of the time, the answer is no. I think that's the benefit that we have as consumers now, is being able to test our own product or service, test our own customer experience, and then take that back and innovate in our own business.
Okay, some great insights there. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your views and advice with the audience as well. It was a really engaging conversation, so thank you so much. And thank you all for listening in.
Thank you very much to Dan and his panel of consumer experts there.